All right, so get ready because today we're diving deep, way back to the 13th century, Southeast Asia.
Ooh, ambitious.
We're talking about the Majapahit Empire. And you know I'm excited about this one because, well, you've brought the goods, haven't you?
Well, I figured we'd go straight to the source.
Yeah.
We've got excerpts from some fascinating academic papers, even some stuff from Indonesian Wikipedia. So yeah, I'd say we're pretty well equipped for this deep dive.
Which means even if our listeners think they know the Majapahit, this is next level stuff, right?
Absolutely. What's amazing about the Majapahit is that their legacy is massive. I mean, you can still feel their influence all over Indonesia today. But their story, it's not just about military power or political maneuvering, although they were certainly good at both.
Oh, we're talking about an empire that knew how to make a statement. But it's more nuanced than that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a story of cultural fusion, religious tolerance even, surprisingly, technological innovation. It's all these threads weaving together to create something truly unique.
Okay, so imagine this. It's 1293 AD, and the Mongols, led by Kublai Khan, they're on a bit of a, shall we say, a power trip, demanding tribute from, well, everyone.
They weren't exactly known for their subtle diplomacy, were they?
Not really. And the dominant force in Java at the time, the Singasari kingdom, they're not having it. Their last king, Kartanagra, let's just say he basically told Kublai Khan where he could stick his tribute demands.
That's putting it mildly. There's even the story that he defaced the Mongol envoy. Talk about a power move.
Oh yeah, bold move. But like many bold moves in history, it didn't end so well, did it?
Not for the Singasari, at least.
Yeah.
Kublai Khan, well, he wasn't exactly known for letting things slide, so he launches this massive invasion of Java. And while the invasion did weaken the Singasari, it also paved the way for a new power to emerge, the Majapahit.
And this is where our friend Redin Wijaya enters the scene.
Ah, Redin Wijaya, the ultimate opportunist.
Talk about being in the right place at the right time. He sees this chaos, this power vacuum created by the Mongol invasion, and he uses it brilliantly.
He starts forging alliances, outmaneuvering rivals, and bam, he establishes the Majapahit Empire with their new capital in Turolen.
This is a guy who was playing 4D chess while everyone else was still figuring out checkers.
You know, it's funny you say that because his story really embodies the whole nature of power during that era. He didn't inherit the throne. He had to fight for it, outsmart his opponents. That adaptability, that cunning, it became a hallmark of the Majapahit.
Okay, so now we have this new empire. They've burst onto the scene, but what was life actually like in the Majapahit Empire? Thankfully, we have a window into their world.
You mean the Nagara-Kutagama?
Exactly. This incredible Javanese poem written just a few decades after the Majapahit were established. It doesn't just tell us, it shows us what life was like, especially in the capital, Trolin. We're talking bustling markets, grand palaces, even descriptions of walls practically encrusted with jewels. It's so vivid you can practically hear the city buzzing.
And it wasn't just poetic exaggeration either. The Nagara-Kutagama, it compares Trolin's buildings to celestial objects, rivals to the heavens. Clearly, this poem was designed to showcase the empire's splendor, to make it crystal clear that the Majapahit were a force to be reckoned with.
They wanted everyone to know, didn't they? And it wasn't just big talk. When you look at the maps from that era, the reach of the Majapahit is just mind-blowing.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking an area that stretched far beyond Java itself.
Sumatra, the Malay Peninsula, parts of Borneo, even reaching into eastern Indonesia. That's a huge chunk of Southeast Asia under their control.
And that's where things get really interesting because they didn't rule through sheer military might alone. They understood that with such a vast and diverse territory, they needed a more, shall we say, nuanced approach.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So how did they manage to maintain control over such a vast and diverse region? What was their secret sauce?
2 words, the mandala system. See, most empires at that time, they were all about centralization. One ruler, one capital, one set of laws. The Majapahit. They flipped the script.
Okay, now you have to explain this whole mandala system to me because it sounds revolutionary, even by today's standards.
Imagine this. A series of overlapping circles, each one representing a sphere of influence. At the center of each circle is a powerful local ruler. Now, these rulers, they retained a degree of autonomy. They were responsible for governing their own affairs, adhering to their own local customs.
So they weren't trying to erase existing power structures. It was more about strategic integration.
Exactly. But here's the key. All these rulers, they owed allegiance to the Majapahit ruler, who was considered the paramount power.
So it's like a network of alliances all held together by this recognition of the Majapahit ruler's ultimate authority. But how did they make sure everyone stayed in line? Was it purely based on trust?
Trust strategic marriages, let's not forget, a very, very powerful military.
Huh.
We know from sources like the Rajapasai and the Kidun Sunda that the Majapahit were a force to be reckoned with.
And with weapons like the kris on their side, it's easy to see why. I mean, everyone's probably seen a kris at some point, that wavy-bladed dagger so iconic to Indonesian culture.
It's more than just a weapon, though.
Oh, absolutely. It's almost a sacred object. It represents bravery, status, this direct link to the Majapahit legacy, even today.
It's amazing how certain objects can become so deeply ingrained in a culture's identity. And the kris isn't the only example of the Majapahit's ability to adapt and innovate. Remember those Mongols we talked about? The ones who inspired that whole invasion thing?
How could we forget?
Well, the Majapahit, they learned a thing or two from that little encounter. They adopted gunpowder technology and eventually developed their own pretty terrifying weapon, a setbang cannon.
Hold on, so they took the technology of their enemy and used it to become even stronger. That's some next-level strategic thinking.
That's the Majapahit for you. And their military innovations didn't stop there. Their army wasn't just big, it was incredibly diverse. We're talking soldiers from all corners of the empire. Javanese, Sumatrans, Malays, even people described in one source as being from foreign continents. This multi-ethnic force was a key part of their success.
It makes sense, though, right? It allowed them to adapt to different terrains, combat style.
They were nearly unstoppable.
So we've got this powerful military, this vast empire, a fascinating and unique system of political control. But what was the glue that held it all together? Was it just the threat of force, or was there something more?
Well, the Majapahit understood that true power wasn't just about conquering land, it was about controlling the seas. They were masters of maritime trade. Their empire was connected by this complex network of sea routes.
So we're talking about this empire that spanned islands, cultures, religions even. It's huge. But who are the people actually running the show? Who are these Majapahit rulers?
Well, let's just say, they were a fascinating bunch, full of ambition, intrigue, the kind of stuff you'd expect from a powerful dynasty.
I'm getting some serious Game of Thrones vibes here.
You're not far off. We already talked about Raden Wijaya, right? The founder who played everyone to gain the throne.
Right, the ultimate political chess master.
Well, his successors, they had some pretty big shoes to fill.
I can imagine.
Take Jayanegar, his son, for example. Imagine inheriting this brand new empire as a young guy. Talk about pressure. But it turned out that holding on to power, well, that was a lot harder than winning it.
I was going to say, it couldn't have been smooth sailing the whole time. There had to be some bumps along the way, right? Rebellions, power struggles.
Oh, you know it. Jayanagar's reign was full of them. He was eventually assassinated, actually.
Which just goes to show it's lonely at the top.
No kidding. But, the Majapahit, they were resilient. They weren't going to crumble just because of one ruler, even if he was the king.
Someone must have stepped up to keep things from falling apart. So who picked up the pieces?
Well, get this. Jayanagar's half-sister, Tribhuwana Wijayatunggadewi, she becomes regent, ruling on behalf of her young son, Hayam Wuruk.
A woman in power during that era. That's impressive.
It was practically unheard of. But Tribhuwana, she was a force of nature. She had incredible political instincts, ambition. She wasn't just keeping the throne warm for her son. She was a ruler in her own right.
History is full of surprises like that. But she wasn't alone, right? Didn't she have a pretty famous advisor?
Ah, you must mean Gajah Mada. Now, there was a man who knew how to make an entrance. And when we talk about the Majapahit, we absolutely can't forget his infamous Sumpah Palapa, or the Palapa Oath, as it's sometimes called.
Okay, I've heard whispers about this oath, but I have to admit it sounds a little too dramatic to be true.
Well, just picture it. Gajah Mada, standing in the Majapahit court, he basically declares that he won't indulge in any spices.
Hold on, back up, no spices. In a world where spices were like gold.
Exactly. He swore he wouldn't touch them until he had united the entire Nusantara archipelago under Majapahit rule.
Talk about setting a high bar for yourself. He basically staked his entire career, maybe his life, on this oath. So was Gajah Mada all talk? Did he actually pull it off?
Well, let's put it this way. Gajah Mada was a fascinating mix of strategic brilliance and, well, some might say, ruthless ambition. He was a military genius, no doubt, and he significantly expanded Majapahit territory during his time. But he also understood that brute force could only get you so far.
Which brings us back to the mandala system, right? It wasn't about conquering and absorbing territories. It was about something more elegant.
Exactly. Gajah Mada was playing 3D chess while everyone else was stuck with checkers. He would conquer a region, sure, but then he'd offer them a place within the Majapahit system. They got to keep some autonomy, preserve their customs, and in return, they were much less likely to rebel.
It's like the old saying, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down.
Right, give people a little respect, a little autonomy, and suddenly they're not so eager to bite the hand that feeds them. Gajah Mada, he understood that.
He sounds like he was quite the operator, but he could have done it all alone, right? What about Hayam Wuruk, the king he was serving? Was he just a figurehead, or was he actually involved?
Hayam Wuruk, oh, he was no mere figurehead. In fact, his reign is considered by many to be the golden age at the Majapahit. Remember that poem we discussed, the Nagarakar Tagama, with all its descriptions of magnificent celebrations and thriving markets? That was all under Hayam Wuruk's rule. He's remembered as a wise, just ruler who really focused on solidifying the empire's gains and cultivating peace and prosperity.
He sounds like the real deal.
He really was. But even golden ages, they don't last forever, do they?
Sadly, no. So what happened after Hayam Wuruk? Did the Majapahit just fade away peacefully?
I wish it were that simple. Hayam Wuruk's death in 1389, well, it was a major turning point for the empire. His successor, Wikramawardhana, he faced a whole new set of challenges. Imagine. Internal power struggles, whispers of dissent, ambitious nobles all vying for power.
It sounds like the empire started to unravel a bit from the inside out, even before any outside forces came into play.
Exactly. Internal conflicts. They weakened the empire from within, making it much more susceptible to external pressures. And by the 15th century, a new force was emerging in the region that would change everything. Islam.
Okay, so we left off with the Majapahit at this kind of crossroads. There's still a powerful force, but cracks are starting to show, right? Internal struggles. And this new religion, Islam, is starting to gain a foothold in the region.
Yeah, it was a time of massive change. And, it's easy to assume that the arrival of Islam would lead to this immediate clash with the existing Majapahit order.
Right, like this epic battle between two completely opposing forces.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But the reality is much more, well, interesting. Remember, the Majapahit, they had this history of incorporating different cultures and beliefs.
The mandala system, the religious harmony we talked about, it wasn't about imposing one dominant culture. It was about finding ways to coexist.
Exactly. And initially, it seemed like Islam would just become another thread in this rich tapestry of Majapahit culture, just as Buddhism and Hinduism had before.
And there's actual evidence to suggest that's how it played out, at least for a while, right?
Absolutely. We mentioned that 14th century Muslim burial complex in Trowulan. I mean, that's a pretty clear indication that there was a Muslim community living and seemingly thriving within the heart of the Majapahit Empire.
That's fascinating. It really challenges this narrative of inevitable conflict between Islam and these empires. But if the Majapahit were so good at incorporating different cultures, what went wrong? Why didn't they just absorb Islam like they had with other faiths?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. Remember those internal power struggles we talked about after Hayam Wuruk's death?
Right. Things started to get a little, shall we say, complicated.
To put it mildly. And that's really the key. Internal weakness, it breeds instability. It creates opportunities for new powers to emerge, to challenge the status quo.
And in this case, those new powers were the Islamic sultanates, right?
Precisely. The Demak Sultanate, in particular, they saw an opportunity and they seized it. They chipped away at the Majapahit's control, bit by bit. And finally, in 1527,
they sacked Trolan, the Majapahit capital.
It marked the end of an era, the fall of the Majapahit Empire. But here's the thing about empires, about legacies. They have this way of echoing through history.
And that brings us to the heart of this whole deep dive. Because let's be honest, most people listening to a podcast about a 13th century Southeast Asian empire, they probably aren't living in 13th century Southeast Asia. So why should they care? What's the lasting impact of the Majapahit?
Because the Majapahit, they offer this incredible example of how even after an empire crumbles, its influence, its ideas, they can continue to shape a nation, inspire its people, even centuries later.
And nowhere is that more evident than in Indonesia.
Exactly. You see it everywhere.
Okay, so you're telling me this modern dynamic nation still carries the fingerprints of this empire that fell over 500 years ago? I need some concrete examples, because that's a bold claim.
Okay, challenge accepted. Let's start with something simple. The Indonesian flag, the Sang Merah Putih, those bold red and white stripes, straight out of the Majapahit playbook. Those were the colors flown by the Majapahit Navy, a symbol of their dominance at sea.
And that symbolism, it's not just a relic of the past. I mean, even today, the Indonesian Navy, they proudly display those same red and white stripes on their warships.
It's a powerful link to their seafaring ancestors, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
And then there's the national motto of Indonesia, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, unity in diversity. That potent phrase, this idea of unity amidst difference, lifted straight from the Sudasoma, a Javanese poem written during the height of the Majapahit Empire.
Talk about a timeless message, especially for a nation as diverse as Indonesia, with all its islands, languages, religions, cultures. It's incredible to think that something as fundamental as their national motto is rooted in the Majapahit Empire.
And it goes even deeper than that. Architecture, art, storytelling, you can find the Majapahit influence everywhere in Indonesia. Take the Candi Bentar, for example, that split gate that's so iconic in Balinese architecture.
Yeah, it's beautiful, so distinctive.
It originated during the Majapahit era, or those towering Padaraksa gates with all the intricate carvings. They're found not just in ancient temples, but in palaces and even in some modern buildings.
It's like walking through a living museum. The past isn't just confined to textbooks and artifacts, it's woven into the very fabric of Indonesia.
And that's just the physical stuff. What about the stories, the legends? Remember the tales of Panji we discussed? These epic romances, these heroic adventures, so popular during the Majapahit era.
They're still being told today, aren't they?
Oh yeah. From traditional shadow puppets to modern novels and films, they capture something essential about the values and beliefs that were important to the Majapahit. Loyalty, courage, this deep sense of duty and righteousness.
It's amazing how stories have this power to transcend time. And it makes you realize that history, it's not just dates and names, it's alive. It's all around us, whispering to us through art, architecture, even the words we use every day.
It's all connected.
So to wrap things up, what I think is so incredible about the Majapahit and what we've hopefully shown in this deep dive is that they weren't just a powerful empire. They were a testament to the power of unity, of cultural fusion, of embracing diversity as a strength. And those ideas, they didn't die with the empire. They continue to resonate in Indonesia today, serving as a source of pride, of inspiration.
And hopefully for our listeners, it's a reminder that history, it's not just something that happened in the past. It's a living, breathing thing. It shapes our world in ways we don't even realize. So the next time you encounter something that seems ancient, or maybe even a little bit irrelevant, take a moment, take a closer look. You never know what echoes of the past you might find, what stories are waiting to be discovered.
Beautifully said. And on that note, thanks for joining us for this incredible deep dive into the world of the Majapahit. Until next time, keep exploring.